Hello, all praise to Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Just going to change this a little bit. So, I'm going to do a video on the beast in Revelation. And it's probably going to be two videos, and maybe even three. I've got a lot of material here to get through. And I'm going to be doing a lot of Bible reading as usual, but also going into some of the pagan and secular history and some other things as well. But so in previous videos, in the last video I talked about Solomon, and that sort of touched on some things similar to what I'm doing now. And I've also done a series on Mystery Babylon and the Great Whore of Babylon. And I titled those videos Mystery Babylon is Jerusalem, or Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon, I think something like that. And I think that's true in that the Whore of Babylon, that's Jerusalem, I think. And I'm pretty sure it is. But then Babylon itself, there's the beast, the woman is riding the beast, and we'll get to that. It's in Revelation 17. But what is the beast? Because there's two things going on. There's the whore of Babylon, and then there's the beast on which the whore rides. So I'm going to do these videos on the beast. And in the past, I have touched on this topic, and I made a few mistakes, which I'll try to correct, or I will correct in these videos. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail. But after this video, I don't think I've got every single aspect of this figured out, because it's quite complicated. If you've read the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel, which are the primary two books I'm going to be looking at, they're complicated. There's a lot of symbology, a lot of weird stuff. But I think I've got the main bits figured out, the main points figured out. So I'm just going to start by reading Revelation 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. So we're going to be talking about, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about that beast. And so the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound were healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. So that beast there, it's a leopard. The dragon gives the power and great authority. So we go to Revelation 12. There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with and we can postulate that that's the Jews, or that's Jerusalem. It's going to give birth, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And it's a complicated topic, this topic, and there's a lot to go into, and I'm not going to read every single thing. I'm still going to point you in a few directions. I recommend getting some Bible software such as The Word or eSword or something like that, where you can do word searches and pull out verses. And one thing that's worth looking up is woman in travail. There's a lot of instances in which that is in the Bible. It's interesting when you're researching this topic. And just some of the things that will come across. It's worth doing word searches and seeing where else these words and phrases have appeared in the Bible. So woman in travail comes up quite a lot. So this woman being with child, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. So that's delivered of Jesus. I think that's the common interpretation. And as we get down to verse 5, that'll become more clear. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. So it's a red dragon being Satan, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. So that's the dragon, that's the beast we're talking about in Revelation 13. The red dragon, it's Satan. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them down. And sorry, the bit where it's identified as Satan is Revelation 19. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which is ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to heaven and to his throne. So that's Jesus, but it's not just Jesus, that one single man who lived. I believe that that's all of the saints who are going to be in Jesus, part of all the body of Christ. I think that's referring to. Yes. So, it has the bit where it says, she brought forth a man-child. Oh, sorry. The dragon stood before the woman, verse 4, stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for devour her child as soon as it was born. That happened in Matthew, I can't remember which chapter, on the first couple of chapters, where, might have been in chapter 2, where Jesus was born and Herod, the Roman authority at the time, killed the newborn babies, all the children aged 2 and under, to try and kill Jesus. So there's that. That's what's referring to. But it's also, I think, referring to the tribulation period coming up. And on this time, like that, I believe in the rapture, pre-tribulation rapture. I think Satan is waiting to devour the child as soon as it's born. So I don't know if it means he's waiting up in heaven to devour us, and that's why it is the war in heaven, which is described a bit later in Revelation 12, I think it is. I haven't got it here. Anyway, so that stuff. There's too much to get through. I want to start getting through it quickly. So we go to Revelation 17. We're talking about the beast, the red dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns. In Revelation 17, there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So that's Jerusalem. I did a whole bunch of reading in those previous videos I made, Jerusalem as Mystery Babylon. I'll go into a couple of things here. In Jeremiah 51, set up the standard upon the walls of Babylon, make the watch strong, set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes, for the Lord hath both devised and done that which he spake against the inhabitants of Babylon. O thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. So that bit there, dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come. That's phrasing which is very similar to the words in Revelation 17. And when you read through Revelation 17 and 18, though a lot of the phrases in there are things that are used to describe other nations in other parts of the Bible. And we're going to go through a few things here. But in a previous video, I can't remember which one it was, I said that the beast, the 7 heads of the beast, there's 7 kingdoms. And I said that the 7 kingdoms were the Sumerian kingdom, and Egypt, and Babylon, and the Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman, and then like the split Rome. And we're going to get to the prophecy of Daniel later on in this video or the next one. And I said that the last kingdom was basically the Vatican and the Roman Catholic kingdom, you might say, which is split up amongst like the European countries, and the Vatican and the Catholic religion and the mystery religions sort of associated with that. All that type of stuff is would be the 7th kingdom, the sort of split Roman Empire. And the one thing I think I got wrong there was I don't think the Sumerian religion is the first kingdom. I think it's Assyria, and so it'll be Egypt and Assyria as the first 2 kingdoms of the beast. We're given the others, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman, we're pretty much given them in Daniel, and we'll get to that to read them. But so yeah, this beast, this 7-headed beast, it's all of these kingdoms, and I'll read a bit about Assyria, sort of proving why that is one of the heads. But it seems to be the case that what's happened is, Israel, the nation of Israel, has been in all of these kingdoms. So, Israel was in Egypt, and it was doing quite well in Egypt. But then, a new king rose in Egypt, and enslaved the nation of Israel, basically, and started treating them badly, and then that brought God's judgment upon Egypt. And because in Genesis, God tells Abraham that his seed will be many, and those who bless his seed will be blessed, and those who curse his seed will be cursed. And so that's the pattern we've seen throughout the Bible and throughout history. We've seen that Israel were in Egypt, and initially Joseph, he helped he helped the Pharaoh through the 7 years of famine, and the Pharaoh blessed him and blessed Jacob, and the family, the 12 tribes of Israel at the beginning there. And so Egypt did well, and then Israel grew, and the new Pharaoh that came up, didn't want to be taken over, or felt threatened by Israel, and so treated them badly. But you could say that Satan came into the Pharaoh, the king, and caused that to happen. And that would be part of the Dragon Empire. And that seems to be the pattern that happens. So the northern tribe of Israel misbehaved, and so the Assyrians came down and took them, and, took over the northern tribes. And then God put his judgment out. God used the Assyrian Empire to judge Israel, but then also God used Israel to judge Assyria. And then that happened with the southern tribes in Babylon, and it happened with the Medes and the Persians as well. And then with the Greeks, and then with the Romans, and we see the Roman stage of it in the New Testament, where Jesus is, the time of Jesus, the Roman Empire are occupying Jerusalem. And that seems to be the case with these nations, these beast nations, the beast kingdoms. They're all associated with Israel. They're nations that Israel has committed her whoredom with, because Israel, or Jerusalem, you might say, I don't know which would be the correct definition, but the Jews, Israel, has committed whoredom with these other nations that are basically the satanic nations, the pagan nations on the earth. And so that describes the end times, what's happening, because in the end times, and we'll read more about this, but this is sort of the summary. In the end times, you've got all the nations of the beast kingdom all coming and basically judging. God's using them to judge Israel. He's bringing them all against Israel, and he's going to judge. He's going to punish, Jerusalem and the Jews. He's going to do what he has done in the past. He's going to destroy and punish the whore, which is his wife, which is Israel. He's going to punish them. But he's going to leave a remnant, because he always leaves a remnant. He's going to leave 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe, which is described in Revelation 7. He's going to punish them, and he's going to bring all the nations of the world, and he's going to punish the nations of the world as well. He's going to do it all in the one spot, in Jerusalem. So that's sort of the end time. That's the big picture, I think, is what's happening in the end time. But just to go into Assyria, and why I think it's not the Sumerian empire, it's part of the beast, I think it's Syria. So in Nahum 3, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favoured harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts that selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts, behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdoms thy shame. And I will cast abominable filth upon thee, and I will make thee vile, and I will set thee as a gazing stock. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste, and who will bemoan her? Hence, whence shall I seek comforters for thee? So there we have Nineveh, but it's using language that's very similar to Revelation 17 and 18. And the northern tribe of Israel were captured by the Assyrians, so they were in Assyria. And just to go into a bit about Nineveh, it's an ancient Assyrian city in Upper Mesopotamia, located in the outskirts of Mosul in modern-day northern Iraq. It is located on the eastern bank of the Tigris River and was capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Today it is a common name for the half of Mosul that lies on the eastern bank of the Tigris. So of course we know the Americans are in Mosul, in Iraq, and there's been stuff going on there, and the Americans have been there for a while. And we'll get into that a bit more later, but it's interesting that the Babylonians and the Assyrians are in Iraq, like the big cities there are in Iraq, Mesopotamia, a bit in Iraq, and the Americans have been there. And the Americans, I would suggest, we're going to get to it a bit later, but there's the 7 heads of the beast, and like the 7 kingdoms, the 7 kings, and then there's an 8th one that rises up, and it's of the 7. And the 8th one, you might suggest, is the American Empire. But we'll get to that a little bit later. It was the largest city in the world for some 50 years until the year 612 BC, when after a bitter period of civil war in Assyria, it was sacked by a coalition of its former subject peoples, the Babylonians, Medes, Chaldeans, Persians, Scythians, and Sumerians. Its ruins are across the river from the modern-day major city of Mosul in Iraq's Nineveh Governorate. So going to Isaiah 7. And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. So it's talking about here when the northern tribe of Israel allied with the Assyrians to come against the southern tribe. And that's a bit of background for Isaiah 8. For the Lord spoke also again unto me, saying, For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, waters of Shiloah, as I understand, waters in Jerusalem, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son. So that's the king of Syria and the king of Israel. Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks. And he shall pass through Judah, and he shall overflow and go over, and he shall reach even to the neck, and stretching out his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. And O Emmanuel, that would be Jesus, so he's talking to Jesus there. In the Old Testament, anyway, so yes, king of Syria and king of Israel went up toward Jerusalem, and so brought the king of Assyria against them. And then in Isaiah 17, and hold on one second. You'll have to forgive my ignorance. When I started doing this video, I just assumed that Syria and Assyria are the same, and my history is not good in that anyway. I'm sure you can do some research into that, but they seem to be overlapping regions. I'm not sure if they're exactly the same thing, but anyway. And in Isaiah 17, it's talking about the burden of Damascus. Behold, because there are some people who think that there's a prophecy I'm going to read here in Isaiah about Damascus being destroyed, and some people think that this is related to the beginning or a precursor to the tribulation period, or maybe it's going to happen in the tribulation period. I don't know, but I'm just going to read that now. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which lie down, and none shall make them afraid. Fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom of Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be as the glory of the kingdom of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. Skipping down to verse 12. Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noises of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of mighty waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. And behold, at eventide trouble, and before the morning he is not. This is the portion of them that spoil us, and the lot of them that rob us. And then in Jeremiah 49 is another bit. Concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea. It cannot be quiet. Damascus is waxed feeble, and turneth herself to flee. And fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her, as a woman in travail. So woman in travail coming again. How is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? Therefore her young men shall fall in the streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. And I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. So we've got some prophecies against Assyria and against Damascus. And yeah, so I think this Assyrian Empire is one of the cities of the beast. And then Egypt will be another one, and I've talked about that a bit before. And I think it's one of the more obvious ones because God talks many times about how he brought them out of Egypt, and then I've talked about before how Revelation 11 it talks about the two witnesses being in the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So our Lord Jesus Christ was crucified in Jerusalem, so it's identifying Jerusalem as spiritually Egypt. And then there's plenty of other things, but let's go into a couple more things about Egypt. So in Exodus 32, of course, they'd come out of Egypt, and then Moses has gone up to the mountain. Is it Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb? I should have looked this. Anyway, hold on, I'll look. Yeah, Mount Sinai. So God was talking to Moses in Mount Sinai, and the people. He was gone for a little while, so the people wanted to worship a god, and so Aaron ended up making them a golden calf. So that's in Exodus 32, verses 3 and 4 read, "And all the people brake off their golden earrings, which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron, and he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." So obviously God wasn't very happy with that. But anyway, that's one thing about Egypt. And then Egypt is, at least in some ways, synonymous with sin. And coming out of Egypt is sort of like coming out of sin. Exodus 16. "And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt." So they departed out of Egypt into the wilderness of Sin. And we go to Ezekiel 30. "I will pour my fury upon Sin, the strength of Egypt. And I will cut off the multitude of No. And I will set fire in Egypt. Sin shall have great pain, and No shall be rent asunder, and Noph shall have distresses daily." So I find that interesting. Sin is a city in Egypt, as I understand it. And it's interesting, he's going to set a fire in Egypt. Sin shall have great pain. So what's going to happen to sin? Well, sin's going to be thrown in the lake of fire. Satan and all the people who worship him, and the beast, all the people who worship the beast, they're going to be thrown into the lake of fire. And so just interesting, I thought. And Jeremiah 46 is another interesting bit to read. But I can't read everything. It's too much. But I recommend doing get some Bible software and do some word searches of interesting things, and the words that seem to come up and the phrases that seem to come up multiple times. And you'll find a lot of verses that add detail to the picture. So going back to Revelation 17. So he carried me away. I think it's Revelation 17. Yeah. Verse 3. "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So that's the beast, the 7 heads. 7 heads would be, the 7 kingdoms: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman, and then the split Roman, the Vatican, the Roman Catholic. The 10 horns, and we'll get into this a bit more, but 10 horns is the new kingdom that's going to come up, as I understand it, the Antichrist kingdom. We'll get to that a bit later. Now go into verse 7. "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." And that beast that was, and is not, and yet is, that's an interesting one. You could say there's a lot of possibilities for that. I'm just going to read a bit of Revelation 9. "And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And it was given him the key of the bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit, and the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth hath power." And going down to verse 11. "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in Greek tongue his name Apollyon." I've talked about previously, I think the videos were called Another Sun God, and there's 2 parts to that. I talk about Apollyon. And I've talked about before the sun god worship, and how that's a common theme in pagan worship, is worship of a sun god. Apollo was the Greek sun god, and he was also worshipped by the Romans as well. So there's a Greek and Roman god, the sun god. He's the angel of the bottomless pit, and Greek and Rome, of course, 2 of the beast empires. So as far as the beast that was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. We could say that that's Apollyon or Apollo, which would be the Greek and or Roman Empire, and is going to go into perdition. Well, yes, because Satan, Satan's going into perdition. he's going into the lake of fire. In Joel 2, if you want to read about the locust and things, Joel chapter 2 is another place to read about that. And go back to Revelation 17. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So there's 5 kings, and we're about to get into Daniel. The 5 kings, 5 have fallen, so that would be the Syrian, Egyptian, Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Greek Empire. And then at the time when John was writing this, the Roman Empire existed, so that would be, the way I'm interpreting it is that's the one that is. And then there's the one is not yet come, and when he come, he must continue a short space. That you could argue that is the toes split empire. I don't know, but there is another interpretation in that would be. You could say that the Roman Empire still exists, and that the Catholic Church, and not just the Catholic Church, but like the continuance of the Roman Empire, like the Byzantine Empire, for example, and like Germany is, you could argue, is part of the Roman Empire, and France and England and even America. You could argue that you could argue that the Roman Empire hasn't fallen, and so therefore you could argue that the one, like the head, the king that is yet to come, is the Antichrist king. But it's, I'm sort of waiting on what happens next, whether it be the rapture or whether it be the revealing of the Antichrist, assuming it's not Trump. And, I'm waiting on the next thing to get confirmation about this. But anyway, so Daniel 2. So this is where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and the soothsayers in Babylon couldn't tell him the dream. So Daniel asked God what the dream was, and God helped him to understand. Anyway, so Daniel 2, verse 31, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, and his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, and the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, and no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. Remember, Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So, at this time there was another King of Kings. So there was another empire, another king who was ruling the entire world, and that would have been Nebuchadnezzar. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after these shall arise another kingdom. After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these things, it will break in pieces and bruise. And sorry, the third kingdom, iron of brass, I may have said bronze elsewhere with brass. Verse 41, And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So there we see basically the history of the world, the kingdoms of the world, and the mountain cut without hands that smashes the kingdom, that would be Jesus and Jesus' kingdom. And it's interesting how the final kingdom, the toes, the iron and the miry clay, it's interesting how you could say, so iron, that could be the Roman Empire, you could say that's the fractured Roman Empire, that you could argue that still exists. And you could say that the miry clay, I think it's in Jeremiah, but maybe other places as well, God talks about molding us. He's molding us, like we're the clay and he's the potter, and he's molding us into the shape that he desires, I guess. So I find that interesting because we're people who are Christians, people who worship Jesus Christ and God Almighty, the Father. We're amongst the spread Roman kingdom that's treading the whole earth down, you might say. So in Daniel 11. So Daniel 11's got a lot of stuff in it which is difficult to understand. I'm just going to read a bit of it. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. Now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be richer than they all. And by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm. Neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. And just skipping down to verse 45. And he shall plant actually, I'm just going to pause because the video is too long. I'm running out of time in the video. Anyway, skipping down to verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas of the glorious mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So that whole chapter has a lot of stuff in it which I find difficult to understand. But the beginning there is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, and Alexander the Great would have been the great king that conquered the world very quickly, and then his kingdom, he died young, and his kingdom was broken up into 4 regions because he didn't have an heir. So 4 of his generals, if I remember correctly. And I've talked about that in previous videos. I think I talked about it in the Another Sun God videos. And so that's what it's talking about. And then it sort of talks about some end time stuff. And the reason I read that last verse 45, about the last king shall plant his tabernacles of his palace between the seas of in the glorious holy mountain. So in Jerusalem, the last king, you might say the Antichrist, is going to put his home or his palace or whatever in that area, and that might be referring to the third temple. What the people who worship the Antichrist will call the third temple. Not what I would call the third temple, but what could be considered the third temple, the place of the final king, the Antichrist king who declares himself God. It might be what's being referred to there. So, going back to Revelation 17. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So, the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. So we've got the 7 kingdoms, and then is the 8th, and he is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So Apollo is coming out. The Greek version of the sun god is coming out of the bottomless pit, and we've got the Greek Empire here. Seems to be related to their kingdoms shall join themselves together in the end. And the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire both worshipped Apollo. So I think there's some version. I'm going to make it argument. It's a bit later. can't remember the order. Yeah, it's possible that the empire, the Antichrist kingdom, which is going to come up, which has the 10 horns, the 10 regions. It's possible that that's going to be a combination of the Greek and Roman, and a bit of Babylonian, a bit of the Medo-Persian as well. It's possible that, like, some people say that the Islam and the Islamic, the Caliphate, let's say, the Islam is going to be destroyed, like gotten rid of. It wouldn't surprise me. Like, at the moment, Trump and Iran look like they're going towards war. But I've read in was it the Protocols of the Illuminated Sons of the Golden Dawn. I read some of that stuff in some of the early videos I did about QAnon. I can't remember. I think it's the 44th video I did, and I did 4 of them. I think called QAnon, Lucifer's Lies, or something like that. And that was you might say, a prophecy by the enemy, which talks about how basically Trump's going to make peace with Iran. And so I don't know if that's going to happen, but if that happens, it wouldn't surprise me if this new beast that comes out, and also Trump is associated with the Saudi Arabians, and I'll put a picture on the screen about that. There seems to be something going on with Trump and Saudi Arabia as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if this beast that is of the 7, it's not of a particular one of those empires. I think it might be a combination of all of them. You might say all of the previous 7 beast empires come together as sort of an amalgam of the new empire, which I think it was going to be a technological empire. It's going to be probably to do with the internet and artificial intelligence, and is it the image of the beast? And I think that probably all the nations of the world, all the kingdoms in which Israel has been a whore with, I think all of them are going to come against Israel. And so the Assyrian and the Medo-Persian Empire, they're part of that. So it wouldn't surprise me if what we see, this 8th kingdom, which is of the 7, and if we read on a bit in Revelation 17, and the 10 horns of this beast, which the sawest, are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords, and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So it wouldn't surprise me if what you see is an alliance, but a sort of a Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek sort of alliance of nations in this final empire, which has 10 kings and is dividing up in the world the 10 kingdoms. It wouldn't surprise me if that's what we see as the final kingdom, the Antichrist kingdom on the earth. And with regards to the 10 kings, the Club of Rome, I'm just going to talk about that a little bit. So founded in 1968, Accademia dei Lincei in Rome, Italy. The Club of Rome consists of current and former heads of state, UN bureaucrats, high-level politicians and government officials, diplomats, scientists, economists, and business leaders from all around the globe. So, the most trustworthy people. Anyway, so that's the Club of Rome. There is a conspiracy, and I'll go into that a bit on conspiracywiki.com. The Club of Rome was created in 1868 by the Morgenthau Group. Its original purpose was to create a new world order by the year 2000. The Club of Rome has a hidden agenda to divide the entire world into 10 regions or kingdoms. Establishment. In April 1868, the Club of Rome was founded by members of the original Morgenthau Group during a meeting at Rockefeller's private house in Bellagio, Italy. And then there's the map there. The Club of Rome planned to divide the entire world into 10 economic political regions, which it refers to as kingdoms. And there's one map there, and there's other maps. If you just search for the Club of Rome 10 Kingdoms map, there's a whole bunch of different ones. But so there has been a plan, or it's a conspiracy, that there's a plan to divide the world up into 10 kingdoms. And I can't remember if I've read it yet, but there's like 3 of the kingdoms. 3 of the kingdoms are going to be destroyed. Basically, 3 of the kings are going to be destroyed. Can't remember where that is. I have so much information in my brain. I can't remember if I read that bit yet. Hold on. Yeah, it's in Daniel 7. So I haven't got to that bit yet. But basically, there's 10 horns, and as we will read in Daniel 7, little horn comes up, among these 10 kings, and 3 of them are thrown down. So these 10 kingdoms, the Antichrist, you might say, the little horn is going to destroy 3 of them. But we'll get to that a bit later. And then go back to Revelation 17. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So I think I'm going to stop here, because this is going to be a long video. I have a bit more to do. I'm not completely through this yet, so it'll be a 2-part thing. So I'll leave it here, and watch part 2. May Jesus bless you and keep you. Amen.